In 1994, Eric Lindros was the most dangerous player alive. 6'4", 240, skill of Gretzky, and the body of a freight train. But something invisible was destroying him, and by the end of this, you'll understand why it's the most dangerous injury in sports. June 22nd, 1991, Memorial Auditorium, Buffalo. The Quebec Nordiques hold the first overall pick, and everyone in the building knows the name.
The Quebec Nordiques are very proud to select as first pick overall in the 1991 NHL annual draft, Eric Lindros.
But here's where the story gets strange before it even starts. Lindros refuses to play for Quebec. Not a negotiation tactic, not a bluff. He looks at Nordiques owner Marcel Aubu and says no. He sat out the entire 1991-92 season rather than wear that jersey. The league had never seen anything like it. An 18-year-old dictating terms to an entire franchise. Quebec finally caved. On June 30th, 1992, an arbitrator settled a bidding war between Philadelphia and the New York Rangers. The Flyers won. The cost? 6 players, including a young Swedish forward named Peter Forsberg, 2 first-round draft picks, and $15 million. That package would later help Quebec relocate to Colorado and win a Stanley Cup. That's how much one player was worth before he ever played an NHL shift. Lindros arrived in Philadelphia, and the game bent around him. Bobby Clarke, the Flyers GM, had seen him as a teenager and said he was the best 16-year-old he'd ever watched, ready for the NHL right then. Now Clarke had him. By September 1994, Lindros wore the captaincy at 21 years old. He skated between John LeClair and Michael Renberg on a line the media named the Legion of Doom. The name stuck because it was accurate. If they had the puck, you were in trouble. If they didn't, they'd take it from you and make it worse. In the lockout-shortened 1994-95 season, just 48 games, Lindros put up 29 goals, 41 assists, and 70 points. He won the Hart Trophy as league MVP and the Lester B. Pearson Award as the most outstanding player voted by his peers. He was 22. During his time with the Flyers, only Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr averaged more points per game. By 1997, he had dragged Philadelphia to the Stanley Cup Finals. They got swept by Detroit, but Lindros wasn't the problem. He led the entire playoffs with 26 points in 19 games. He was 24 years old, and the assumption across the sport was simple. This was just the beginning. It wasn't. Something was already wrong. Not with his knees, not with his back, not with anything a trainer could tape or a surgeon could fix. The first crack had already formed years earlier, back in junior hockey when Lindros was 17, and nobody, including him, even knew it happened. Years later, speaking to a room of medical students, Lindros admitted that his first concussion probably happened when he was 17, playing junior hockey in the OHL. He didn't know what it was at the time. He just felt off, slightly disconnected, like the world had shifted half a step to the left. Nobody called it a concussion. They wrote it down as an upper body injury, and he kept playing, because that's what everyone did. The NHL hit started on March 7th, 1998, when Pittsburgh defenseman Darius Kasparaitis caught Lindros clean and dropped him. He had to be helped off the ice and missed 18 games. But the detail that tells you everything is what happened after. Lindros made it to the visiting team's showers, looked at the towels, saw the Penguins logo, and genuinely believed he had been traded to Pittsburgh.
One afternoon, and I was waiting for a slow puck that was coming up along the side of me, and Kasparaitis came across the blue line, and I didn't see him coming at all. And I remember waking up in the trainers in the shower, and I mean, the only silver lining to that was that I thought I got traded to Pittsburgh, and I was going to play with Mario.
He jokes about it now, saying he thought he was getting a chance to play with Mario Lemieux, but the reality of that moment was frightening. The Flyers' response was to send him to a migraine specialist because, in 1998, that's how little the sport understood about what was happening inside his skull. He came back. On December 29th, 1998, he took 2 hits on the same shift, knocked to the ice, avoiding one check, and then driven into the boards by Jason Weimer. He missed 2 games and returned. Then came the night that changed everything between Lindros and the Flyers, and it wasn't a concussion at all. On April 1st, 1999, during a game in Nashville, Lindros felt a stabbing pain in his chest. The team diagnosed a rib injury. That night, teammate Keith Jones woke up in their shared hotel room and found Lindros lying in the bathtub, pale, cold, barely breathing. 3 liters of blood had leaked into his chest cavity and his lung had collapsed. The Flyers trainer was told to put Lindros on a plane back to Philadelphia. Jones refused and demanded they take him to a hospital instead. The doctors in Nashville confirmed what Jones already sensed. If Lindros had boarded that flight, the pressurized cabin would have been fatal. His father, Carl, wrote a letter to the Flyers organization stating exactly that. Carl Lindros had been Eric's agent for years, and he'd been clashing with GM Bobby Clarke over the handling of his son's health long before Nashville. Fans and media painted Carl as overbearing, a father who couldn't let go. Clarke questioned Eric's toughness in the press, but teammate John LeClaire later said the quiet part out loud. When Eric was getting concussions, the team's approach was to give him a couple days and assume he'd be fine. Here's what nobody understood yet. A concussion isn't a bruise. It isn't a bone that cracks and heals clean. It's the brain shifting inside the skull on impact, shearing nerve fibers at a microscopic level, triggering inflammation with nowhere to expand. And every time it happens before the last one is fully healed, the threshold drops lower and the recovery stretches longer. The real damage wasn't the hits anyone could point to. It was what was happening in between them during the weeks Lindros thought he was recovering. So what does that damage actually look like when it follows you home? When the arena lights go off and you're alone with a brain that won't settle down? Post-concussion syndrome is what doctors call it when the symptoms don't leave on schedule. Headaches that sit behind your eyes for weeks. Fatigue so heavy that a trip to the grocery store feels like a full game. Sensitivity to light and noise that turns an airport terminal into something unbearable. For a professional athlete who lived inside arenas, under floodlights, surrounded by 20,000 screaming people, these symptoms didn't just linger. They attacked the foundations of his entire life. Lindros later described what was happening to him during this period, and the picture he painted was nothing like the dominant force the hockey world remembered. He said he became extremely sarcastic, short with people, impatient in a way he had never been before. He developed anxiety that had no obvious trigger and no clear exits, a constant low hum of dread that followed him off the ice and into every part of his day. He couldn't handle galas, airports, or crowded spaces. The things that come with being a superstar became the things he dreaded most. His weight climbed by 30 pounds. His relationships strained under the pressure of a personality that was shifting in ways he couldn't control. He later admitted that the concussions were making him aggressive in ways he couldn't explain and couldn't stop. The fear wasn't just about the next hit anymore. The fear was that the person he used to be might already be gone. In a 2017 interview, a reporter asked Lindros to describe how the injuries made him feel. He whispered something unprintable. The reporter offered the word cranky as a substitute. Lindros accepted it, but the pause before he agreed said more than the word itself. He added that there was no point in going backwards, and that this wasn't a public relations fight. It was just reality. Consider the timeline. In 1995, Lindros was the league's MVP. In 1996, he put up 115 points. In 1997, he led the Flyers to the Stanley Cup Finals as the top scorer in the entire playoffs. His first documented NHL concussion didn't come until March 1998. The gap between the peak and the collapse was less than 2 years. That's not a slow decline. That's a trap door. And through all of it, Lindros understood something the sport refused to acknowledge. He told Maclean's magazine that underneath all the gear and styles of play, there's a person, a human being with feelings. And the silence around what players were going through wasn't working. So the damage kept compounding, invisible to everyone, except the man absorbing it. The 1999-2000 season was supposed to be a reset, but it became the season where everything Lindros had built came apart in public. On January 14, 2000, he took a hit from Chris Tamer and missed 4 games with his 3rd concussion. Then on March 4th, a hit from Hal Gill of the Boston Bruins sent him into the Flyers medical system one more time. The team's staff diagnosed him with post-traumatic migraine headaches, then quietly upgraded it to a grade 1 concussion. Lindros played 4 more games with symptoms before seeking his own independent evaluation from concussion specialist Dr. James Kelly, who diagnosed a grade 2 concussion and said the Flyers staff should have caught it from the start. Lindros went public with his frustrations over the misdiagnosis, and Bobby Clarke treated it as a betrayal. On March 27, 2000, Clarke permanently stripped Lindros of the captaincy and handed the C to defenseman Eric Desjardins. The footage of equipment manager Turk Evers sewing the letter onto Desjardins' sweater was broadcast across North America. 2 years earlier, Clarke had thought enough of Lindros to name him captain of Team Canada at the Olympics over Wayne Gretzky and Steve Yzerman. Now he was publicly humiliating him while he recovered from a brain injury the team's own doctors had missed. Lindros suffered a 5th concussion during a practice session while working his way back for the playoffs. He sat out the first 16 games of the Flyers' 2000 postseason. But by the Eastern Conference Finals against the New Jersey Devils, with the Flyers holding a 3-1 series lead that was slipping away, Lindros forced his way back for Game 6. He scored the Flyers' only goal in a 2-1 loss. So he suited up again for Game 7. May 26, 2000. First Union Center, Philadelphia. 7 minutes and 50 seconds into the first period. Lindros carries the puck into the offensive zone with his head down, the habit he could never shake, the flaw that made him vulnerable every time he was at his most aggressive. Devils captain Scott Stevens steps up from the blue line and drives his shoulder directly into Lindros' chin and forehead. Lindros drops to the ice and doesn't move. His 6th concussion as a Flyer. His 4th in 5 months. The hit was legal under the rules of that era, though today it would draw a 5-minute major, a game misconduct, and a likely suspension. Stevens later said he was never comfortable with that moment becoming one of his defining highlights. The Devils won 2-1, both goals by Patrick Elias, and went on to take the Stanley Cup. That was the last time Eric Lindros wore a Flyers uniform. He sat out the entire 2001 season demanding a trade. On August 20th, 2001, Clarke sent him to the New York Rangers for Jan Hlavik, Kim Johnson, Pavel Brendel, and a draft pick. In his first season in New York, Lindros put up 73 points in 72 games, and for a brief window, it looked like the old version of him might still exist somewhere underneath the damage. But it didn't last. His production dropped each year after that. An 8th concussion in 2003-04 limited him to 39 games. He moved to Toronto, then to Dallas, where he scored just 5 goals in 49 games during his final season. In his last game as a Star, a playoff loss to Vancouver, Lindros later said he knew it was over. He wanted the season to continue, but also wanted his career to end because he simply wasn't having fun anymore. Eric Lindros officially retired on November 8, 2007 in his hometown of London, Ontario at 34 years old. His career totals: 760 games, 372 goals, 493 assists, 865 points, earned him a place in the Hockey Hall of Fame in 2016. But those numbers also carry the weight of everything that was left on the table, because 760 games across 13 seasons means he averaged barely 58 games a year in a sport that plays 82. The recovery from what the concussions did to him off the ice took longer than the career itself. Lindros spent years working with a mental health professional to manage the anxiety and personality changes that had followed him out of the game. He encouraged other athletes to do the same. He said he feels strong, vibrant, and productive now, but getting there was its own long road. What most people don't know is that Eric's brother Brett played for the New York Islanders and retired on May 1st, 1996, at the age of 20, because of post-concussion syndrome. The same invisible injury ran through both brothers, and it ended 2 careers instead of 1. That personal history is what drove Lindros toward the work that may end up mattering more than anything he did on the ice. In 2013, a 17-year-old rugby player from Ottawa named Rowan Stringer sustained 3 concussions in less than a week during high school games and passed away from second impact syndrome. The coroner's inquest produced 49 recommendations. Legislation was proposed to Ontario to implement them, but the bill stalled in the legislature until Lindros stepped in. Rowan's law was passed in June 2016, becoming the first concussion-related legislation in Canada history, requiring schools and sports organizations to adopt formal protocols for identifying and managing brain injuries. Lindros was named to the advisory committee and donated $5 million of his own money to the London Health Sciences Centre for Concussion Research. When asked about the NHL's handling of head injuries, Lindros told the Canadian Parliament that anytime you mix athletics and money, the line blurs, and he urged lawmakers to focus their energy on youth sports, where the culture could still be changed from the ground up. He also pushed back against NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman's repeated reluctance to acknowledge a direct link between concussions and CTE, saying he didn't understand how the NFL could change its position on the issue while the NHL still couldn't. The most direct proof that Lindros' suffering changed things came in January 2011, when Sidney Crosby, the next generational talent, the next first overall pick, suffered a devastating concussion. Unlike the Lindros era, the Pittsburgh Penguins held Crosby out until he was fully cleared, following protocols that didn't exist when Lindros was being sent to migraine specialists and put on planes with collapsed lungs. Crosby came back. Lindros never fully did. But the reason Crosby got the chance is that Lindros forced an entire sport to take the invisible injury seriously. In 2017, the NHL named him one of the 100 greatest players in league history. In 2018, the Philadelphia Flyers, the same organization that stripped his captaincy, questioned his toughness, and traded him away, retired his number 88 and hung it from the rafters. Eric Lindros was supposed to be the greatest player of his generation. For a few years, he was exactly that. He never got his Stanley Cup. He never got to be what he was supposed to be. But the injury that ended him left no scar, no cast, no mark anyone could point to. It just quietly took everything. His game, his identity, his joy. One hit at a time. One entire sport looked the other way. The invisible injury ended a superstar, but it also forced an entire sport to finally open its eyes. If this story hit you, subscribe to Skates and Scars, because the hardest hits in hockey aren't always the ones you can see. And if you want to support more stories like this, hit the super thanks button below. Every contribution goes directly toward making these videos happen.